Good morning, everyone. And President Manning, I thank you for inviting me to participate in this. And those were wonderful opening comments. And about those keys that were announced earlier, there's a rumor going around that there's a Hyundai as a door prize for showing up at 8 o'clock this morning. So that's really what it's about. You just heard that my background, both in terms of education and my career, has been at four-year institutions. But President Manning has heard me talk before about the strong connection I feel with community colleges. My mother-in-law, Elizabeth McPherson, was a teacher and administrator at what was then called Forest Park Community College, St. Louis Community College at Forest Park, in the late 60s and all through the 70s, at a time of enormous expansion of community colleges. I wonder if you're aware that in the late 1960s, there was a community college opening in this country at the pace of once a week. And of course, it had to do with the baby boomers, and you can look at me and see what happened to them. But it was a remarkable period of time, and she was very much a part of that growth. And my wife has also taught at community college, both in Springfield and in St. Louis. And in the years that I've lived in St. Louis, the years I've lived in Springfield, about 35 years now, I have worked with the president of the community college there, Lincoln Land Community College, Charlotte Warren, a very capable administrator. And I've also spent most of my career at this institution to the south, University of Illinois Springfield, which for most of its history was a senior institution, an institution set up by the Board of Higher Education, as was Governor State, in the late 1960s, to receive transfer students from community colleges at a time that the four-year institutions were reluctant to receive those students. So as a faculty member and then administrator at University of Illinois Springfield, we worked very closely with our community college colleagues. And then this all culminated for me over the past year when I've had the great privilege of working with staff members at the Illinois Community College Board and reconnecting with my longtime colleague, now the executive director of the Community College Board, Karen Hunter Anderson. So I have a strong feeling for the mission and the accomplishments of South Suburban College. And as President Manning said, the way that a community college can lead economic development and revitalization of community. Now, you're going to meet this fellow over here, Rick Mayer, in a few minutes. And I've had the opportunity to work with him before, great pleasure to work with him before. And we were chatting about what he was hoping for out of the initial segments of this strategic planning effort. And he asked me a great question, or he put forward a great question. What do we, and he means the people in this room and the people at South Suburban College, need to know about the world we live in that should shape the work of the college? What do we need to know about the world we live in that should shape the work of the college? Well, that's a big question, and there's a lot of different ways to approach that. I mean, after all, there's so much going on in terms of technology and globalization, just such an enormous range of issues. And I can't take on all of that. But I'm going to touch on a few big ideas, things that people are talking about, changes that are underway, that I think should influence and shape the work of the college, but in that realm of higher education policy. Other speakers will fill in other pieces of this, and as we go along in the conversations this morning, people will go into some more depth about the things that I'm going to make reference to. So let's start with the idea of the American dream. What do we mean by the American dream? The report Reclaiming the American Dream, which is one of the background documents, and I hope you did your reading, from the American Association of Community Colleges, provides a backdrop to today's strategic planning work. And it lays out very nicely what we mean by the American dream. And it cites two interrelated components of that dream. First, that each generation would enjoy a better standard of living than the previous one. That's a part of the American dream. Now, I wonder if you grew up with that idea. I certainly did. My grandparents came from Russia and Germany in the late 1800s. They worked very hard and didn't have much money. They didn't graduate from high school. They just worked. My parents, the next generation, they were high school graduates, but they didn't graduate from college. In contrast, my brother and I graduated from high school and college and went on to get graduate degrees. All the time that I was growing up, it was just understood, like the air that we breathed, that my generation in our family would be more educated than the generation that came before us, and that the generation before that, and that we would enjoy a higher standard of living. Now, I'm sure that there are many variations on that theme in the life experiences of the people in this room, but the pattern in my family is the pattern that the authors of Reclaiming the American Dream report were talking about. The dream was that each generation would enjoy a better standard of living than the previous one. An increase in the standard of living propelled by increasing levels of education. But the reality now, when we look at the country as a whole, is that we're seeing younger generations actually less educated than their elders. The second component of the American dream, highlighted in the report, is that a high school diploma and hard work could get a person a decent middle-class life. You know, that was just part of what we understood kind of growing up. Well, it ain't so anymore. The jobs for people with high school diploma or less are simply disappearing, and the jobs that remain do not typically provide a wage that will support a middle-class lifestyle. Now, the recession had an enormous impact on people whose attainment level was a high school diploma or less. Jobs for people with this level of educational attainment declined by 5.6 million during the recession. But the really telling data relates to what happened after the recession was technically over in January 2010. And you know how the economists, they have their definitions of when recession is going on, when recession is over. January 2010. Jobs for people with high school diplomas or less continued the downward trend seen in the recession. There's been no recovery of jobs for people in this group. Now, jobs for people with associate's degrees or some college did recover and are now at a level comparable to what existed at the beginning of the recession. And jobs for people with bachelor's degrees or better have gone up by 2 million during the recovery. Last February, former Undersecretary of Education Martha Cantor addressed my board, the Board of Higher Education. In her presentation, she provided a quote from Tom Friedman, the New York Times columnist and author of the best-selling and thought-provoking book, The World is Flat. Friedman states, "The biggest domestic issue in the next 4 years will be how we respond to the changes in technology, globalization, and markets that have, in a very short space of time, made the decent wage, middle-skilled job, the backbone of the middle class, increasingly obsolete. The only decent wage jobs will be high-skilled ones." And Martha Cantor went on to talk about the president's goal, that every American would complete 1 year or more of higher education or advanced training post-high school in his or her lifetime. Now, this is so important because education continues, even in 2014, even for our generation, to be a path to counter the devastating increases in inequality in this country. You've heard these statistics about inequality. American incomes are lower in real dollars than they were a decade and a half ago. Various groups, for example, men and those without college education, have fared even worse. Median income of a full-time male worker, for instance, is lower than it was 4 decades ago. In America today, it's harder to escape the social class of your birth than it is in Europe. The last time inequality approached the levels we see today was in the years before the Great Depression. So these are all statistics that speak to what's happening in the country in terms of inequality, and that education can be a counter to that spread of inequality in the country. Now, these two threats to the American dream, that future generations will not enjoy a better standard of living than previous ones, and that a high school diploma just doesn't cut it anymore in terms of ensuring a middle-class lifestyle, are drivers of Illinois' strategic plan for higher education, known as the Public Agenda for College and Career Success. The first and overriding goal of that plan is to increase educational attainment in Illinois to match the best performing states. Specifically, we have a goal in Illinois of having 60% of the working age population with post-secondary credentials by the year 2025. How are we doing so far? Well, so far, we're on the right path. We started at about 41%. To reach our goal of 60%, we need year-over-year increases of 4,400 new post-secondary credentials, which includes one-year certificates, associate's and bachelor's degrees, each year, between our base year of 2008 and the year 2025. As of 2012, the most recent year for which we have complete data, we're slightly ahead of where we need to be. So we're on the right path. But it's going to be tough going to continue to climb that hill. And it reminds me of some of the hills that I have climbed, literally. You know, the beginning part is easy, but then as you've been going at it for a while, it gets harder. We've got some serious obstacles to overcome in the years between now and 2025 if we're going to reach that goal. One obstacle. We've got a declining number of people graduating from high schools in Illinois. In 2011-12, we had 151,000 high school graduates. It's projected that in 2024-25, that target year, we're going to have only 138,000 high school graduates. That's an 8.6% reduction. And the challenge there is that we increase the likelihood of our success in getting students through post-secondary education if they start in right after high school graduation. So with declining numbers, it's kind of working against us in terms of raising up that proportion of the population that has a post-secondary credential. So that's one obstacle we have. Another obstacle we have is the out-migration of the high school graduates that we do have. You know, Illinois ranks 49th in net student migration. By net, I mean if you compare the students who come in to the state for post-secondary education versus the students who go out of the state for post-secondary education, we've got an enormously larger number that go out than come in. We're 49th. You know, what's that 50th state, Rick? New Jersey. Yeah, right. Now, look, I mean, just because a student goes to Michigan or Iowa or Indiana for post-secondary education, that doesn't, you know, necessarily mean that they absolutely won't come back to Illinois with their post-secondary credential. Many of them will. But there is this phenomenon of, you know, you go out of state, you meet somebody, you get a job there, and you stay there. So that's a problem for us, the out-migration. And a third challenge that we have, a third obstacle to raising up the level of educational attainment in Illinois, is the increasing levels of poverty that we have in this state and the decreasing availability of state-based financial aid that can underwrite the costs of college for students. And one of the biggest lessons learned for me during the past year that I've been Executive Director of the Board of Higher Education has been a much sharper recognition of the extent of poverty around us, that we don't necessarily see, but it is around us. And the shocking statistic on this front is that Nearly 50% of the students in Illinois public schools are classified as low-income students. Nearly 50%. That's extraordinary. And then our wonderful MAP program, Monetary Award Program, one of the 4 best and most robust state-based grant programs in the country. It's a wonderful program. But it's only supporting about half of the eligible applicants. See, so, and people who are close to this, and I think there might be some financial aid people in the audience, know that the cutoff for a student being able to receive a MAP grant, an incoming college student, is getting earlier and earlier each year, and I think we're about to pass it for this fall of 2014. Those are our challenges. Those are among our major challenges. Now, I am very conscious of the key role that community colleges play in moving us toward the 60 by 25 goal. And I'm going to say something now about my colleagues at the public universities, and I say this with respect. We have some here, I'm sure. But in general, and this is a terrible generalization, but in general, they don't understand the huge contribution made by our community colleges to educating Illinois citizens and to helping us achieve the 60 by 25 goal. They typically don't understand, for example, that 42% of Illinois residents are enrolled in post-secondary degree granting, that are enrolled in post-secondary degree granting institutions, are enrolled in community colleges in Illinois. That approaches double the proportion of students enrolled in 4-year public or 4-year private institutions. It would not be that way in other states. You wouldn't find that. In other states, you would find, in many other states, you would find a much larger proportion of students enrolled in 4-year institutions than in community colleges. But in Illinois, it's nearly twice as many in community colleges. And beyond the sheer numbers, there's the effectiveness of our Illinois community college system. One of my favorite statistics on this front is that Illinois ranks second in the country in the proportion of students who start out as full-time students at community colleges and then transfer on to a 4-year institution to get that baccalaureate degree. Second in the country. That's a great credit to the preparation that students get at Illinois community colleges. Now, resting on our laurels is not going to get us to the 60 by 25 goal, even with the great work that is happening at community colleges. Simply put, we need to do better. There are far too many students who start at schools like South Suburban and accumulate debt but no degree. This is a problem around the country, and Illinois is no exception. Students are taking too much time, they're taking too many credits, they're spending too much money, and they're not graduating at the rate that they should. For example, in terms of taking too much time, at the national level, of those students who do graduate, full-time students in 2-year institutions take 3.9 years to get that associate's degree. Only 5% of full-time students at 2-year institutions actually do graduate in 2 years. On average, students who graduate from 2-year institutions accumulate 78.8 credits. Isn't 60 credits the standard for an associate's degree? Where does this 78.8 come from? And this figure does not count remediation. And those extra credits translate, as you're well aware, into increased debt. And only 12.9% of full-time students in 2-year institutions graduate at all within 150% of the expected time of graduation, 3 years. So many students are accumulating, as I say, debt with no degree. We have to do a better job of not just getting students into college, but at helping them succeed. Fortunately, there has been a great deal of work going on around the country aimed at doing just that. And out of that work has come a set of strategies that have been demonstrated to improve student success. Now, I'm going to very briefly mention these strategies. I know that speakers who follow will dig into them in more detail. And you also have the American Dream Report, which rings this same bell. And you'll also see that these ideas align well with the recommendations in the environmental scan report. And you can read more about what I'm about to talk about on the website of Complete College America, Complete College America. First of all, in thinking about improving student success, I urge you here at South Suburban to examine how you approach remedial education. For far too many college students, college begins and ends in remediation. Remedial students graduate at a rate that's about half the rate of their college-ready peers. Now, I recognize the challenge of open admission, that philosophy that is so important and central to the soul of community colleges, and that some of the students you're admitting to South Suburban may have reading and math skills as low as at the middle school level. And last night at dinner, somebody mentioned that sometimes students don't know how to use a ruler. Okay, so I know that these problems are real and that there's no way around remedial education for a student who comes to you with a middle school reading or math level. That said, we need to recognize that the assessment and placement process is too often an obstacle for college success. Community colleges and four-year institutions around the country are experimenting with using a placement range rather than a single cut score, or using multiple measures to assign students to remedial courses. And with integrating needed support in the college-level gateway course, that college English or college math course, and integrating it into the course under the idea of a co-requisite. Students take the credit-bearing course, and they take a co-requisite. Take a look at the document available on the Complete College America website called Core Principles for Transforming Remedial Education, and see the research on the effectiveness of co-requisite remediation. Second, we need to encourage students to enroll full-time, where full-time is understood to mean 15 credit hours per semester, because that's how you get your degree in 2 years. Now here again, I say with great humility that I know very well that for many students at South Suburban, particularly adult returning students, full-time enrollment is simply not possible. But there's another group of students out there, and I know them because I've talked to them, students who think that the way to go with their post-secondary education is just to stick their toe in the water. You know, well, I'm going to take a course this term at South Suburban. These are students who really have a choice, and they could take 15 hours per semester if they were encouraged to do so, and if they understood that the way that full-time enrollment affects the chances of actually graduating. Borrowing more money in order to attend full-time may actually save money in the long run by increasing the likelihood of graduating. We now know that time is the enemy of college completion. Simply put, we have compelling evidence that students are more likely to graduate if they take 30 credits that first year. Please understand, it's not only the more academically capable students who are more likely to graduate if they take 15 hours per semester. We have striking data collected over a number of years from the entire state of Hawaii, which includes four-year institutions and two-year institutions, showing that students in the lower academic quartiles also graduate at higher rates when they take 15 hours per semester. Now, just if you want to kind of get a feel for this, you remember the book All In, written by Paula Broadwell, who worked in various capacities with General David Petraeus. You remember this whole thing that was in the news? You remember Paula Broadwell? Okay. Regardless of what we think about what happened on that front, her relationship with him, the idea of being all in instead of just testing the waters when it comes to attending college is sound advice. Third, we need to provide guided pathways to success. This strategy connects strongly with the recommendation in your environmental scan report that South Suburban should enhance supporting and administrative services such as counseling and advising, career development support, admissions and registration, and financial aid services. Here's the story. We know from behavioral economics that too much choice, especially uninformed choice, leads to indecision or poor decisions. There's a kind of paralysis that comes about when there are too many choices. In general, in this country, freedom of choice is a good thing. We value freedom of choice. It is as American as motherhood, apple pie, and in Illinois at least, governors who go to jail. But when it comes to choosing courses, too much freedom is a recipe for wasted credits, accumulating debt, and reducing chances of graduating. In a recent article summarizing this line of thinking, David Jenkins from the Community College Research Center at Columbia University calls this many choices, little guidance. Initial advising and support services are critical. Students' choices of areas of study need to be informed by their high school performance and other measures to recommend broad academic pathways. No student should be classified as undecided. Instead, students who are undecided should be required to choose an exploratory major, what some people are calling meta majors, from among a small number of broad fields. As students progress, the pathways narrow into more specific majors without wasting credits. Jenkins calls these on-ramps. It's a great metaphor, on-ramps that help students choose and enter a program of study. And in the same vein, every student should have an academic map that lays out the courses to be taken each semester. Courses must be taken in the recommended sequence, and if a student gets off track, he or she must see an advisor. Block schedules and cohort-based programs can also be part of the story here, since they provide the structure that is so beneficial to many students. Block schedules in which students can count on taking courses at certain times of the week from semester to semester can make full-time attendance feasible when it might not be otherwise, because they can make arrangements that they can count on with their employers. And my fourth point about proven strategies is, to the extent possible, students at South Suburban should offer and encourage students to engage in what's called high-impact educational practices. High-impact educational practices. These include things like first-year seminars or common intellectual experiences. It includes things like learning communities and writing-intensive courses and collaborative assignments, undergraduate research, service learning, community-based learning, internships, and capstone courses and projects. And you can read about these on the website of the American Association of Colleges and Universities, AAC&U. We now know that these experiences not only deepen learning, they also increase the likelihood of completion. And what's wonderful is that these experiences have more of an impact of increasing the likelihood of completion on at-risk students. It's the most remarkable thing. Some of these high-impact practices, I understand, would pose a challenge to implement at a community college. But I noted with considerable interest that one of the recommendations in the environmental scan, and this is a quote, was to offer students more practical, hands-on learning opportunities, such as internships, workplace-based learning, and apprenticeship-style learning. Now, there are a lot of different reasons why we'd want to do that. Not the least of which is to increase the chances that the student would get employment on the far side of that internship or fieldwork. But the thing that I'm adding to that is that we know also it actually increases the likelihood that they will hang in there and graduate when they have that kind of experience. So internships, fieldwork, applied study, whatever term we use, not only deepen learning, such programs can also increase the likelihood that a student will graduate. And you can understand why, because they can then see themselves in that role that they're experiencing at the site of the internship. Now, I've spoken for quite a while, and I want to mention one final idea about the world that I live in, the higher ed world, that I hope will shape the work of this college. You recall that I said that one of the challenges we face in Illinois in reaching the 60 by 25 goal is the declining number of high school graduates. You're likely to see that decline mirrored in the region served by South Suburban. The environmental scan report notes that the population growth in this region has been slow relative to the United States, and President Manning alluded to this. The region added approximately 66,000 residents between 2003 and 2013, a 10-year growth rate of only 1%, compared to 9% for the United States as a whole, 3% for Illinois, and 6% for Indiana. In the face of that demographic reality, there's one step that can be taken to boost educational attainment in the region, and that is to recruit back adults with some college but no degree. Around the state and the country, people are reaching out to the some college but no degree population. Marketing helps, and I'd bring your attention to the idea of developing and then marketing incentives for this population to return to school. And you can look at the kind of incentives that are possible by going to the Kentucky Know How to Go website, Know How to Go with the number 2. Waiving some fees as an incentive, one-stop shopping for advising and financial aid as incentive, variety of things like that. Plus, the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, you should be aware, is supporting a pilot project, an advertising campaign underwritten by the local Springfield Community Foundation, the organization I'm on the board of, to encourage people to complete their degrees. I wonder if the Illinois Student Assistance Commission and a community foundation from this area would be willing to extend that effort to this region. Another thing in terms of adult reentry is how important guidance and counseling are. And I would urge you to take a look at the work of the organization Complete the Degree, that's one word, completethedegree.org. And of course, online courses have a big role to play in helping people with some college but no degree who are out there in the world of work. And finally, in this realm of inducing people to come back to complete their degrees, I'd mention prior learning assessment, the strategy of mapping learning that has occurred through a career to coursework. That is, looking for competencies rather than seat time. Credit for prior learning creates a huge incentive to complete the degree. And our wonderful colleagues whose office is in downtown Chicago, the Council on Adult and Experiential Learning, they have great data on how effective it is and the impact that credit for prior learning can have on students actually going back and taking the credit-bearing courses to complete a degree. If you're not familiar with how such mapping occurs, check out the website learningcounts.org, learningcounts.org. So, we've covered a lot of territory, and I hope these thoughts will be helpful as you chart a course for the next phase in the development of South Suburban College. You have my very, very best wishes for a productive and energizing planning retreat. Thank you.